Hello and welcome to my very first YouTube video. I've been inspired by all the great Malazan content to begin sharing my own thoughts on the use of humor in the Malazan Book, The Fallen. And I decided to begin by talking about one of my favorite and, in my opinion, one of the funniest characters in these books, Sergeant Hellian. Hellian is one funny lady, and the fact that she's both funny and female is one of the reasons I've chosen to focus on her for this video. It's kind of depressing how rare truly funny fictional women are, not just in fantasy, but in all fiction. My friends make me laugh all the time, but I can't remember the last time a fictional female character in a book made me laugh out loud. Actually, I can. And it was the first time I've read the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And that was 8 years ago. So, like with so many characters in the Malazan world, my relationship with Hellian is complex. Hellian's not a difficult character to like, but her behavior is often problematic. If I were to describe her to someone who hasn't read these books, it'd probably be difficult to explain why she's one of my favorites. Hellian is a not quite functional alcoholic. She's selfish and lacking in self-awareness. Her addiction often negatively affects those around her. She constantly blames and insults others. It's usually those who deserve it the least. But it's that combination of what is on the surface simply comic relief with that complexity that makes her one of the most fascinating characters in these books to me. So I want to start by looking at the idea of competence as it relates to Hellian. There's this old slapstick trope of the drunk who weaves and stumbles across the screen only to then almost accidentally perform a remarkable feat of agility. Think drunk tightrope walker. At first glance, Hellian's character is the embodiment of this idea that God protects drunks and fools. She sells her sword for a jug of something hours before the assault on Egatan, only to then lead herself and her team to safety as thousands died around them. Her squad, along with Herbs, was the only ones to successfully meet the objectives of the Lether invasion. And yet, that success was entirely due to Hellian's desire to not only reach the next tavern as quickly as possible, but to be able to enjoy her drink in peace once she did. So it's kind of easy to dismiss her successes as a fortuitous side effect of her drunken state. And it is occasionally true, but it's also true that Hellian is a good soldier. Her squad trusts and follows her implicitly, and it's not because they're hoping that some sort of drunken serendipity will protect them as well. It's because when it comes down to it, Hellian will not only fight, she'll do what it takes to make sure that she and her team survive that fight. So why do I think Hellian is such a good soldier? When things go to hell, Hellian steps up and takes command. That she does so out of an almost pure faith in the incompetence of others is irrelevant. It's that sense of incompetence, whether real or perceived, that causes her to step up and do what needs to be done. And she does. She's focused and intelligent. She understands the larger tactical goals, even though she often seems more focused on her own immediate goal of finding something to drink. The fact that she manages to then figure out a way to accomplish both is a testament to her ability to find creative solutions, to problems that have managed to stump her peers. Her strategy of conquering Lether tavern to tavern not only worked, it allowed her to maintain a steady supply of drinks and soft beds while the rest of the bone hunters were wet and miserable outdoors. This is also on the display in the way she manipulates others to defy orders and follow her plan. Whenever we see Hellian through the eyes of other characters, it quickly becomes clear that Sergeant Herb is not the only one in love with her. Fiddler's surprised by how attracted he is to her, and Bottle goes so far as to compare her to Coltane, Dujek, and Prince Kaz in the way her men worship her. Even Skull Death, the only closeted in his own head gay soldier, ends up pursuing her, though that's mostly because of a drunken joke that she is the Queen of Kartul. I'm not sure Hellian understands that love or the reasons for it, but it doesn't stop her from recognizing this attraction as an advantage and using it to get others on board, largely by threatening to cut off a body part. But there's more than that to the loyalty she inspires in her soldiers. There is a bond that goes beyond that of any other squad. While she may lead and protect her soldiers in battle, her alcoholism means that outside of battle, her soldiers are often the ones who must lead and protect her. That interdependency destroys any artificial sense of distance created by rank, and it's what makes Hellian's squad more of a family than any other squad in the Bone Hunters. A dysfunctional family for sure, but a family nonetheless. I think another aspect of Hellian's character that I think is important to mention is her fears. Hellian often displays an almost reckless fearlessness, particularly in battle. Yet one of the most defining aspects of Hellian's character is her fear, specifically her phobia of spiders. It's this fear and this accompanying terror at life itself that's the underlying source of her caustic humor, her anger, and of course her drinking. I also think that it's this fear that informs the way she interacts with others. She clearly demonstrates an understanding of and dedication to her fellow soldiers, and yet she never allows her to express that affection. Even in her own thoughts. While this is certainly reinforced by her drunkenness, her inability to recognize Touchy and Breathless as two different people or remember who maybe is. I love it when she calls him probably. I see that as an attempt to build armor against her twin fears of becoming too attached and losing them in battle. There's this great moment in The Crippled God where Hellian, who's been forced to sober up by the fact that they're in the middle of the desert, is asked by her squad why she's scared of spiders. It's a rare moment of vulnerability, and she opens up to them about a horrifying childhood trauma that explains both her fear of spiders and the reason she drinks. It's impossible not to feel empathy for her as she tells her story and feel as though both her squad and we as readers understand her better as a result. And that feeling lasts right up until she thinks to herself how effectively that made-up story and the sympathy it evoked will cause her soldiers to forgive her anything now. Why does she hate spiders? Because they're spiders. Who doesn't hate spiders? Oh, that section gets me every time, and I mean that literally, because even on rereads, I find myself pitying her for having gone through this terrible trauma when she tells that story. We never even learn if there's actually any truth behind it, but it really doesn't matter. Hellian is who she is, and if her soldiers, and by extension the readers, are going to love her, then we just have to accept her the way she is. I want to wrap wrap up by talking about what is both the most defining and the most difficult aspect of Hellian's character, her alcoholism. In a lot of ways, Hellian is a throwback to the days when alcoholics on TV and in movies were seen as comic relief. She's the lovable town drunk. There's often that element of physical humor and slapstick to the scenes with Hellian. Leaning back in her chair, only to discover she's actually on a bar stool, reaching for a railing that does not, in fact, exist, or collapsing in camp and wondering how the stars got inside her tent. Hellian has a tendency to wind up sprawled on the ground and wondering how she got there. There may be some merit to the idea that Hellian's character is poking a bit at the claim that humor is an inappropriate response to pain and trauma. Addiction, it's not funny, but I think most people who have experienced some kind of addiction or trauma also recognize the importance of finding humor within the horror. Perhaps Hellian is a gentle reminder that the ability to laugh, particularly at ourselves, our weaknesses, and our fears, is often what allows us to survive our darkest moments. But this doesn't change the fact that we as the readers recognize that Hellian is an addict and that there is a tragic aspect to her character. So even as we're laughing at her, there's this sense of discomfort because we're laughing at the inebriation of an alcoholic. The question then becomes whether this sense of discomfort is intentional. Are we supposed to feel guilt when we laugh? That seems vaguely cruel. And honestly, if Erikson didn't want us to laugh, he shouldn't have made her so damn funny. She's not the only character or storyline in these books to cause discomfort in the emotions that they evoke. If a state of discomfort is a part of growth, then it can be said that the inclusion of these themes and topics are serving a purpose in that they cause us to think more deeply about things we would often prefer to avoid. But we aren't allowed to avoid or ignore the negative effects of Hellian's drinking entirely. After a humorous series of events in which Hellian falls overboard in Malaz Harbor, comes up with a floated rat corpse in her mouth, and then crawls ashore covered in sewage and blood-sucking eels, all in the name of finding a drink, she thinks to herself, thirst is a demanding master. The most demanding master. These moments are rare, since Hellian does her best to avoid thoughts like that, but they recur just regularly enough to ensure that we're never quite allowed to relax into the idea of Hellian as just the lovable drunk. Though she may initially come across that way, if Hellian was truly nothing more than an amalgamation of humorous drunken tropes, I don't think her character would inspire the kind of love for her that many Malazan fans share. Perhaps the most important aspect of Hellian's character and her alcoholism is that she embodies these tropes and then transcends them. Hellian is an alcoholic. She is not a fool, and she is not an object for our pity. Despite her addiction, she still exhibits competence. She has something worthwhile to contribute. Beyond that, she is loved by others. Her life matters to those around her. And while the alcoholism may make loving her difficult sometimes, it doesn't change the fact that they do. Sergeant Hellian transcends the idea of the alcoholic character as someone to pity or laugh at, and becomes instead someone we love as well. Laughter creates bonds between people, and Hellian is nothing if not funny. She is tremendously funny, an intelligent character with depth. She's also weak, flawed and often driven by need and fear. In other words, she is a human being just doing her best to survive. And that is why Sergeant Hellian is one of my favorite characters in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do it again sometime.